Ladies and gentlemen, dear participants of the international workshop on religious communities and sustainable development in the Middle East. Assalamu alaikum. It is my pleasure to take part in this international workshop and to present my lecture on social policy in the Islamic world from theory to practice. Uh, First of all, I should thank all the organizers of this workshop for inviting me to be with you, of course, virtually. And also, I should mention that today is the first day of the Persian calendar called Nowruz, the first day of the new year of Persian calendar, and therefore I congratulate all those people who uh, celebrate this event in the Middle East and also in Central Asia, West Asia, and other countries, and wish all of you a year of full health, wealth, and also social development for the region. Um, well, this lecture is mainly based on a book that have been recently published by Palgrave Macmillan and edited by me, but of course with several chapters from various authors from different countries in Muslim societies and also from outside uh, Muslim societies in Western countries. Um, well, the book consists of two parts, two main parts, and 13 chapters. The first part of the book is dealing with conceptual and comparative aspects of social policy in Islam and the Muslim world. In the first chapter, actually the first chapter of this part, which is the second chapter of the book, I and my colleague Zahra Mahdavi Mazinani have studied foundations of social policy and welfare in Islam and have addressed different values, norms, principles of providing social welfare in Islam, and also have addressed different strategies and solutions and practices of providing social welfare. Chapter 3 is written by Rana Jawad, which is a very interesting chapter, and I think she will be taking part in this workshop as the keynote speaker and will address some of the issues that has been uh, discussed in her chapter with Rana say. Other chapters are dealing with the issue of amal khair or doing good, and also the issue of funding mechanisms for cash transfers in the MENA region for the children based on a child rights perspective. Of course, with Islamic practices with regard to fundraising and financing these kind of programs. The second part consists of various chapters on different Islamic countries, from Iran, which has been written by myself, and also other countries like Turkey, Algeria, Tunisia, Azerbaijan, Bangladesh, Egypt, and also Malaysia. As you see, the countries spread all around the world from West Africa to the Middle East, so Central Asia, and also to Southeastern Asia. Different countries with different um, kind of historical, political, social, and economic backgrounds. Um, Well, I do not want to go into details of all these chapters, but want to elaborate some key points which have emerged from this study and the book that I introduced to you. The first point that I want to mention is that a great deal of Islamic teachings revolve around social issues, especially social protection and social welfare. And therefore, in theory, we could argue that there is a distinct Islamic welfare regime with its unique system of values, principles, and policy initiatives. Of course, these issues are underrepresented in the related literature on social welfare and social development, especially in English language. And obviously, we could not say that there is a unified and a single reading of Islamic teachings, but there are differences among various Islamic sects and also competing readings of these texts and teachings over time and place. For example, the Iranian experience of Islamic revolution in 1979 um, revealed that there are various thinkers, various groups that have their own readings of social teachings and economic teachings of the Islamic school of thought. And you could, for example, trace socialist, liberal, conservative, and social democratic conceptions or readings of Islamic texts. But although competing readings of Islamic teachings may provide diverse and even contradictory understanding about the Islamic viewpoint with regard to social policy and welfare, um, one could argue that there is a pro-welfare state uh, reading, and there is justification, enough justification for providing a pro-welfare state interpretation based on the original and authentic texts. Um, I argue this based on a set of values and principles which underpin and guide the practice of social welfare in Islamic teachings, namely intrinsic altruism, religious brotherhood and sisterhood, personal responsibility, takaful or public responsibility, state responsibility, social rights, social balance or tawazun and equality, avoidance of tadawul, collective and public ownership, undesirability of poverty, as well as social justice. All these principles and values together constitute a holistic conceptual framework within which one could understand the general approach of the Islamic school of social policy and welfare. Apart from principles and values, one could find different strategies, a series of strategies, solutions, or practices of providing social welfare according to Islamic teachings. The main practices or solutions are zakat, homes, waqf, sadaqah, qard al-hasana, nadr, and anfal or public resources, and uh, other practices and solutions which have been discussed in more details in the book. So these practices are mostly of a redistributive, of vertical redistributive nature and include both obligatory and non-obligatory actions, both by the state, by the Islamic State, and also the individual Muslims themselves. So the argue is that based on Islamic teachings, original Islamic teachings, which have been discussed and reviewed in the second chapter using a social theology approach, one could find a pro-welfare state reading of the Islamic teachings. One of the main arguments of this book is that social welfare based on Islamic teachings is not merely a charitable, a kind of charitable and residual welfare, but uh, one could find a kind of actually universal, actually kind of approach to providing welfare. All of people who are living in the Islamic State have the social rights with regard to enjoying a dignified living standard, and it is the responsibility of the state to secure it. Even non-Muslim populations have their rights, have the social rights, and have been discussed in this book. Principles such as social balance and avoidance of tadawul support this idea. Social justice is obviously more compatible with distributive pattern and end state theories of justice, and which could be inferred by reference to strongly distributive and mandatory instruments like zakat and khums. But uh, social welfare should not be totally state dominated in design and implementation. A prominent role is reserved for the community regarding the provision of welfare in the multi level responsibility approach outlined in the book, different chapters, especially in the second chapter of the book. While welfare provision by the state and community by no means should lead to welfare dependency. Uh, what I what I say to this point was about the theoretical aspects of social welfare and social policy in Islam, but in practice, we see that none of the states in countries studied in the present book exemplify this type of regime in its totality. For example, religious mechanisms for financing welfare programs, especially through homes and zakat, are not adopted by the governments as a key source for social expenditure, and revenues from these sources mainly remain in the non-governmental sector and also in Shia societies remain in the hand of religious figures like Maraje. And only in few countries have dedicated uh, official structures for collecting and redistributing zakat and other religious uh, religious financial issues. Um, Therefore, religious welfare is regarded mainly as a kind of charity welfare instead of being perceived as and practiced as a right-based um, kind of approach. This is despite the potential of these finding mechanisms. For example, the chapter written by Aysan on Turkey uh, states that if the annual amount of zakat is to be collected, the government could collect about 24.2 billion euros. It was estimated in 2015. There was a potential zakat revenues just in Turkey about this figure, and but much less than this figure is now collected, and it is not collected by the state directly, and it is kind of non-governmental initiative. It means that neither the governments nor the individual Muslims in these countries adhere to these practices in full. Moreover, it seems that governments have mainly refrained from institutionalization of religious welfare as part of their formal structure, while continuously have attempted to govern it through devolving and regulating. They have devolved it to non-governmental religious organizations and have tried to regulate it. If we consider the role of the state in Muslim societies in social policy and focus on official welfare establishments in these countries, we could find a kind of hybrid social welfare system in their nature, which incorporate aspects of various or elements of various welfare regimes, for example, as the typology of Sping Anderson shows, we can see that the mix or a hybrid of different kind of regimes could be found in various countries. And examples of these have been discussed in various chapters. But when we turn the focus from the government to the wider landscape of social welfare provision and focus on the welfare mix in Muslim societies, we find that a kind of Ziodo Islamic welfare regime could be identified with prominent roles played by the family and the community actors based partly on Islamic teachings and practices. Yuda calls this the Islamic welfare diamond, and by that he means a balanced form of relationship between welfare actors, a state, market, family or relatives, and community. The other important issue with regard to welfare in Muslim societies is that since the religious welfare remains mainly in the third sector, the interaction between the state and non-governmental actors and among the NGOs, both religious and non-religious, becomes a dynamic field for the provision and distribution of welfare in Muslim societies. Applying various regimes of religious governance, these relationships could range from cooperation and competition and even contradiction. The point is that, and which has been mentioned in various chapters of the book, that the outbreak of welfare-related Islamic NGOs uh, is in fact in line with the neoliberal tendencies of the governments in Muslim countries in recent decades to replace the state-centered approaches to social welfare with charity-based and community-based approaches, and therefore transfer their welfare responsibilities to other actors and justify it with recourse to Islamic ethos, of course. One important issue is uh, about the capacity of the states in Muslim countries to design and deliver sustainable social policies, which are heavily undermined by foreign actors, especially in such regions as the Middle East and North Africa. We can see that international interventions and imposed wars, such as in Afghanistan, Iraq, Syria, Yemen, Lebanon, uh, Libya, and occupied Palestine, not only weaken the states and its capacity for providing welfare, and also weakening and undermining the capacity of informal welfare actors like family and community, but also pose serious challenges for neighboring Muslim countries. Uh, and the point is that while much is said about uh, the burden of immigration from the Middle East region to To the West, the burden on welfare systems in the West because of these migrations. Uh, there are heavy and huge um, coverage in the media and the research about this burden, but less is discussed about millions of immigrants in countries in the region, for example, in Middle East and North Africa, such as Turkey, Pakistan, and Iran. For example, Iran is home to more than 3 million Afghan immigrants, and it also should face or struggle with harsh international sanctions and vanishing financial resources because of diminishing oil revenues to be spent on social protection programs. But less is discussed about this uh, burden on welfare systems in the region, and mostly is discussed about its burden on Western welfare systems. Um, we could say that vast diversity in trajectories of social policy development across time and place in Muslim majority countries points to the existence of multiple Muslim laws in terms of welfare arrangements. We could not find a kind of unified and single kind of Islamic welfare system. Competing readings and conceptions of desired Islamic welfare system by Muslim scholars, and also different political fronts, as well as among the grassroots, may challenge the very idea of the utopian Islamic welfare state. Therefore, social policy and welfare in Muslim societies remains a novel field of study with fresh research agenda for the future. And I hope this book could provide a good starting point for more in-depth research about various aspects of social policy and social welfare in Islam. Thank you for your attention and salam.